Oh yeah, time for another one.
Hey folks,
Ah! Holy shit. What the fuck is that on your face? I wouldn't show that off on camera.
welcome to the Ramble. You know, there is a bit of contemporary folk advice that tells us to fake it till we make it.
Somebody told that to your wife, didn't they?
And that can actually be good advice, depending on the circumstances.
Is that just what your wife tells you, Steve? It's okay, buddy.
Aspiring writers are often taught to always say yes when a potential job comes up. Even if they think it's a job they won't be able to do. Always say yes, and then figure out how you're going to accomplish whatever you agreed to do later.
Do I need to? No, I'll leave it.
And that's something that can actually help you to grow as a writer. And it can actually be very exciting to sort of live by the seat of your pants, to commit to doing something that you're not entirely sure you even can do, and then figure out how to do it so that you can deliver on what you promised to do. But the thing is, I noticed some folks, for instance, the current president of the United States.
Nope, here we go. Hang on, everybody. This is going to be a bumpy ride.
Or even, and I know this is hard to believe, some folks here on YouTube who seem to be stuck at the fake it stage of that particular piece of advice. They just seem like they're going to keep on faking it, and they have no intention of ever even trying to make it.
What, like you faking to be a decent person and faking to be self-aware?
And at this point, I should probably clarify that fake it till you make it doesn't mean fake it until you are handsomely rewarded for faking it. It doesn't mean make it in that sense, at least not as the phrase has traditionally been understood. If that is what that phrase meant, then Donald Trump and many of the aforementioned folks on YouTube who have managed to derive quite substantial incomes for themselves from basically just being incredibly shitty people in front of their video cameras.
The lack of self-awareness is astounding with you. You're a pretty shitty person in front of your camera, too. And on Twitter. Wait, you've blocked everybody on Twitter. Never mind.
Would be the absolute epitome of following that advice, because they indeed faked it until they made it. When you say fake it till you make it, what you actually mean, again, conventionally, as people have traditionally used this phrase, is fake it until you can actually do the thing that you are faking being able to do.
Ah, so that's what your wife does. Okay, cool. Gotcha. Let's carry on.
Everyone has probably had to bluff their way through a situation from time to time. We've all had to fake it temporarily in certain situations.
Well, in the real world, we call that a job interview.
And sometimes it works. Sometimes you can fake your way through and you can get out on the other side and no one's the wiser. But in everyday life, that is an extremely limited strategy. That is a very poor long-term strategy unless you are able to surround yourself with people who always fall for your bluffs.
Like the people that still watch your channel and fall for your bullshit?
And one of the downsides to the internet.
We all know that Steve thinks that the downside to the internet is that it gives everybody a voice, even the people that don't agree with him. That's why he wishes YouTube would silence these people, like me, and terminate all their accounts. Because, you know, you gotta protect feelings from being hurt.
In spite of all of the wonderful things that the internet has given our lives and our society, one of the downsides is that it has made it easier than ever before in human history for people to surround themselves with those kind of people, with people who will just fall for their bluff constantly.
Steve, people falling for your bluff is the only reason you still have a channel.
Trump, for instance, pretends to be an expert on subjects that he obviously doesn't understand on even a basic level, and he gets by because he's not aiming his message at people who know better at people who are informed on those subjects and can see from the moment he opens his mouth that he's just completely talking out of his ass. He's not talking to those people. He's talking to the people beyond those people who think that Trump does know what he's talking about, who believe him when he boasts about how great he is at everything, and about how smart he is, and about how big his brain is, and he uses the best words, and he's a great negotiator, and all these things that to most of us seem just like empty, hot air when Trump says them. There's a certain group of people that believe Trump.
Kind of like you and the people that believe you when you start talking about things that you know nothing about, like Islam, and you talk about how peaceful of a religion it is and make apologies for Islamic terrorists.
When he says that stuff. And when he says that stuff, he's not talking to us, he's talking to them. And he has proven that you can at least get elected president by appealing to the rubes, so to speak, if you do it with enough commitment and consistency. You can, we now know, we now have a case study. We have proof that you can win the presidency through that strategy.
And you can also have a YouTube channel with 50,000 subs.
But unfortunately for Trump, fortunately for the country and the world in general, he may be about to also demonstrate that you can't remain president for very long unless you can pivot from pandering to the rubes to demonstrating something that people outside of your private little echo chamber, to coin a phrase.
Steve, that's you. You block everybody who doesn't agree with you, and even block people who follow people who you've blocked. And you refuse to have any form of discussion with anyone who doesn't agree with you.
Would consider to be basic competence and good judgment. Similarly, when anti-feminists make YouTube videos about feminist concepts, it's obvious, again, as with Trump, from the moment they open their mouths, that they have no idea what they're talking about. They lack a fundamental understanding of the subjects that they are not only explaining, but attempting to critique, attempting to refute.
Anyone who doesn't agree with the almighty Steve doesn't know what they're talking about.
The target audience for those videos isn't feminists, for example. It isn't people who know anything about the subjects. It's people who don't know any better. And that's why people on YouTube can talk about subjects that they obviously know nothing about, but still maintain a certain level of credibility among their audience, among their followers.
Huh. Well, I guess I was wrong. Here I was under the impression that I made videos for anybody who wanted to watch them. People who agree with me, people who don't agree with me. And I was also willing to talk to anybody willing to talk, whether they agree or disagree with me. I guess he is the almighty Steve. He can read minds now.
Because their credibility relies on the ignorance of their followers. They're able to maintain credibility among people who are poorly informed enough to consider them credible. And this becomes a problem from their perspective, and I say from their perspective because from my perspective, it's always a problem.
Steve, from your perspective, everything's a problem. And everyone who doesn't agree with you is a problem.
It becomes a problem from their perspective when they feel it's necessary to reach beyond that bubble of gullible supporters that they typically rely upon.
This coming from a guy who blocks everyone who doesn't agree with him and refuses to engage with anyone who doesn't agree with him.
Since when Trump and his administration are being hounded by scandals and being investigated, and they have to count on winning the confidence of people outside of their cheering section.
Steve, we know you're not talking about Trump. Quit being a smarmy little cunt and just admit that you're talking about people on YouTube that you don't particularly like or who don't agree with you. Oh wait, those two things are the same.
Or when anti-feminists on YouTube do something that is so incredibly shitty that people who usually ignore them start to pay attention to them.
Like what? What do you consider so incredibly shitty? I'd love to know. Examples, please.
And they suddenly find themselves under a different kind of spotlight than that to which they are accustomed. A spotlight that is a lot more critical and being aimed by people who are not nearly as impressed with them as their usual audience is.
Quit being a passive-aggressive pussy, grab your balls out of the mason jar your wife put them in, and name the person or people you are talking about.
See, when Donald Trump says something like, trust me, or I know what I'm doing, that doesn't play outside of his most devoted, unquestioning supporters, a steadily diminishing group, by the way, because the rest of us have his entire lifetime to provide us evidence to the contrary, to provide us evidence that actually he is not to be trusted and he should not be thought of as a competent, capable person.
Steve is not a competent or capable person. I can't take any more of his idiotic shit. I'm going to call it a day. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.